There are listings on Zillow right now in Canadian towns, rural properties, farmhouses priced at $29,000, at $41,000, at $18,000. And every single day, people click on those listings and think they've found the cheat code to home ownership. A house, land, a fresh start for less than a used car. Some of them buy, and some of those people lose everything. This video is about 10 things that are almost never talked about in Canadian real estate content, hidden costs, legal traps, and government failures that turn a $29,000 farmhouse into a six-figure disaster. Not because the listings are fraudulent, but because cheap, rural Canadian properties sit inside a system that is specifically designed, whether intentionally or not, to let buyers walk into catastrophe without a single warning. I've gone deep on the peer-reviewed research, the provincial policy documents, and the news nobody in the affordable housing space is covering. By the time we get to number 1, you're going to understand why the cheapest house in Canada might be the most expensive thing you ever buy. And there's one specific trap, a legal mechanism that can make a property you've already bought, renovated, and spent $60,000 improving completely unsellable overnight that I'm saving for last, because it's the one almost nobody sees coming. Let's start with number 10. Number 10, knob and tube wiring. Old homes built before 1950 and cheap rural Canada is full of them, almost universally contain knob and tube wiring. It's the original electrical system of the era, and it works fine right up until the moment it becomes your entire problem. Here's the chain nobody explains clearly. Many home insurers either refuse to write policies on homes with active knob and tube wiring, or they charge significantly higher premiums. And if you can't get insurance, you can't close a mortgage. Without the mortgage commitment, your conditional offer dies. That $18,000 ghost town home could require a full rewire before any conventional buyer can ever purchase it from you, effectively doubling the real cost before you even move in. The wiring isn't just a renovation issue, it's a transaction-killing issue, and the specific chain of events that leads to a dead deal is almost never laid out clearly anywhere. Number 9, Nova Scotia's gold mine tailings. This one is hyper-local and almost completely unknown outside the province. Nova Scotia has a significant gold mining history, and many cheap rural properties across Pictou, Antigonish, and Guysborough counties sit near or directly on historic mine tailings. The provincial government itself advises residents near these sites to test their well water for elevated arsenic, to not use the tailings as fill for driveways or gardens, and to follow freshwater fish consumption advisories to reduce mercury intake. A $29,000 Nova Scotia farmhouse that looks like a steal could be sitting on contaminated soil, and the standard home inspection doesn't include soil or water testing. You'd have no idea until you're already in. The listing won't mention it, the inspector won't test for it, and the province's own advice is buried in government documents almost nobody reads. Number 8, landlocked properties. Cheap rural listings frequently don't disclose that the only legal access to the property crosses someone else's land. In rural British Columbia, a surrounding landowner can deny access entirely, and the legal process to establish a right-of-way can be lengthy, expensive, and uncertain, especially when the neighboring landowner is hostile. Many buyers discover this only after closing, when they try to build, renovate, or connect utilities and find that contractors can't legally reach the property. In rural Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and northern Ontario, road allowances that show up on maps are often uncleared bush, legally existing but physically impassable, and the municipality has no obligation to maintain them. You're not buying a property with a road, you're buying a property with a line on a map. Number 7, failed septic systems. Buyers looking at cheap rural properties focus almost entirely on the listing price. Almost nobody thinks about what's underground. Major Canadian mortgage lenders increasingly require evidence of a functioning, compliant septic system before approving financing for rural properties. If you're using CMHC insured mortgage financing, a property with a known or suspected septic problem can be declined for coverage, which effectively kills the deal unless the buyer pays cash or the seller fixes it first. And the replacement costs are devastating relative to the purchase price. A new well costs $8,000 to $15,000 to drill if the existing one fails completely, and a failed drain field runs $7,500 to $25,000 to replace, often more than a new roof or HVAC system. On a $41,000 Saskatchewan farmhouse, a failed septic and well could cost more than the house itself. The CMHC financing angle, where a septic failure can kill your mortgage retroactively, is almost never mentioned. Number 6. Buried oil tanks. Before natural gas became widespread, virtually every rural Canadian home heated with oil stored in underground steel tanks. When owners switched to gas, most tanks were simply left in the ground and forgotten. One North Vancouver homeowner discovered a buried tank that cost $85,000 to remove and decontaminate. Another homeowner's contractor described their tank removal as a nightmare job that destroyed the property, led to a lien being placed on the home, and caused the sale to fall through entirely. In British Columbia, you are legally responsible for the environmental condition of your property, including any contamination caused by an underground oil tank, and most homeowners' insurance policies will not cover soil remediation. The presence of an underground oil tank will also prevent you from being able to obtain home insurance until it's removed. You can't insure it, can't mortgage it, and can't sell it until it's cleaned up at your cost. And the cost can reach $160,000. Most buyers have no idea these tanks exist, or that liability transfers to them the moment they sign. This is a good moment to pause. We're halfway through, and we haven't even hit the biggest traps yet. If you're finding this useful, and I think you're going to find the last 5 genuinely jaw-dropping, hit subscribe so you don't miss the follow-up video on how to actually vet a cheap rural property before you buy. It's coming. For now, let's keep going. Number 5, radon through well water. This is peer-reviewed science that almost nobody in real estate circles talks about. A University of Calgary study found that a groundwater well itself acts as a pathway, allowing deep underground radon gas to reach the surface much more quickly than it otherwise would. Houses in rural communities with groundwater wells have significantly more radon to draw inside. The numbers are alarming. People living in rural, lower population density communities experience as much as 31.2% greater average residential radon levels relative to urban equivalents, equating to an additional 1 millisievert per year in excess radiation exposure to the lungs. Radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer in Canada, and the people most at risk are younger families who buy cheap rural homes and let their kids sleep in the basement. The well water to radon mechanism is almost completely absent from real estate content. The listing won't mention it. The inspector probably won't test for it unless you specifically ask. Number 4, provincial lifetime flood caps. Quebec has capped lifetime government flood support for any single property at $100,000. New Brunswick limits lifetime structural damage assistance to $200,000 per property per disaster type. Alberta provides support only once to any property, even if it changes ownership. What this means practically: if you buy a cheap rural Quebec property in a flood zone and it floods twice in 10 years, which is increasingly common, the government will not cover a single dollar of the second flood. One British Columbia farmer's property flooded 4 times since 2018. She can no longer get flood insurance and regards the property as completely unsellable. Her $200,000 farm became worthless in under a decade. These provincial lifetime caps are buried in government policy documents and never mentioned in real estate coverage. And remember, the mega trap is still coming. Number 3, 1.5 million uninsurable homes and a government fix that's going nowhere. According to the Insurance Bureau of Canada, approximately 1.5 million high-risk Canadian households cannot obtain affordable flood coverage, roughly 10% of all households in the country. The government pledged $450 million over 5 years for a national flood insurance program with a deadline of April 2026, and as of mid-June, there is still no confirmed timeline for delivery, according to the Insurance Bureau of Canada. BC's own Minister of Emergency Management has been direct about it. My concerns right now are that the program appears to be stalled. For the estimated 1.5 million Canadian households at the highest flood risk, this delay is not abstract. It means some homeowners cannot obtain flood coverage at any price and must pay out of pocket, absorb the loss, or rely on disaster financial assistance after the fact. Flood endorsements alone can add $10,000 to $15,000 annually in extreme risk zones. So that $29,000 farmhouse could cost you more than $10,000 a year just for flood coverage, if you can even get it. Number 2, no flood disclosure law, and the maps are a mess. Most people assume there's some kind of legal requirement in Canada for sellers to disclose flood risk to buyers. There isn't. In Ontario, for example, a seller must disclose previous flood damage only if the buyer requests it. Many communities in Canada lack flood maps entirely, and those that do exist are often out of date and inaccessible to the average buyer. Public Safety Canada developed a national flood risk portal to allow searches by postal code, funded from $15.3 million in government funds, and it was anticipated to be launched by the end of 2025, but has not yet been released as of mid-2026. And even now that the technical framework exists, there's a significant catch. The platform's usefulness is gated by provincial and territorial participation, with Public Safety Canada working urgently with provinces and territories through summer 2026 to advance participation. The tool will only turn up results in participating provinces and territories, and as of a week after the announcement, no provinces or territories had publicly opted in, and the search function remained unusable. Even more critically, that portal doesn't account for climate change, according to a report from the Auditor General's office. So when you're looking at that $29,000 farmhouse, there is literally no reliable centralized tool to tell you if it floods every 5 years. And now, number 1, the map update trap, and this is the one I promised you at the start. Here's the scenario. You buy a $41,000 Saskatchewan farmhouse legally, you renovate it. You spend $60,000 on repairs. Everything is above board. And then the municipality updates its flood hazard maps, which many are now being forced to do under climate-driven insurance pressure. Your property is now in a designated flood zone. You cannot get a mortgage to sell it. You cannot insure it conventionally. You cannot rebuild if it burns. The Insurance Bureau of Canada has stated that around 10% of Canadian households now face such a high risk of flooding that they cannot obtain flood insurance. And as a result of increasing risk driven by climate change, some insurers are reducing their coverage or exposure in certain regions. That number is growing every year as maps are updated. Financial institutions have already begun restricting mortgage lending for properties in newly designated flood zones. The property you legally bought, legally improved, and legally own can be retroactively made unfinanceable, not because of anything you did, but because a map changed. You can't sell it. You can't insure it. You can't walk away without taking a total loss. And nobody in Canadian real estate content aimed at budget buyers is talking about this. So here's where we are. You came into this video looking at a $29,000 farmhouse and thinking about the listing price. What you're actually looking at is a potential buried oil tank, knob and tube wiring that kills the insurance, a septic system that can make the mortgage disappear, well water that pulls radon straight into the house, contaminated soil with no disclosure, a road that doesn't legally exist, provincial flood caps that run out after one disaster, a government insurance program that's stalled with no delivery date, flood maps that are either missing or don't account for climate change, and a map update that can make the whole thing unfinanceable overnight. The listing price is not the price. The listing price is the beginning of a conversation about what this property is actually going to cost you. And for the towns that look the cheapest on Zillow, that conversation almost always goes somewhere most buyers never expected. Drop a comment with the province you're looking in and I'll make sure the follow-up covers it. And if someone you know is looking at cheap, rural Canadian real estate right now, send them this. It might be the most useful thing they watch before they sign anything.